Hello and welcome to another episode of the Career Reset podcast, and welcome to the first part of the Career Detox series. I am very excited about this series because that is something I've been thinking about for many months. I've been thinking what would be a good topic to cover over the summer when I don't want to maybe get into very in-depth career transition topics. And I know many of you are probably planning to have that fresh start after the summer, and I thought, what would be the best possible way to actually feel like you're ready for a fresh start, maybe feel a bit lighter about the past and where you've been career-wise. And I decided that this Career Detox series is something I really want to talk about, and I think it's very needed. So compared to my other episodes, which you may or may not have been listening to, these ones will be much shorter, bite-sized, and leave you with one or two things to think about regarding the specific topics I believe you should kind of detox before making your big career moves in the autumn. And today we're gonna get started with detoxing and letting go of your past, maybe let's call them bad decisions, because this is really something that can hold people back big time. I hear people saying things like, I shouldn't have joined that company, I should have known better, I should have never gone for that job in the first place. And they really can beat themselves up for it quite a lot, and thinking that had they made a different decision, maybe now their career would have been in a much different spot. And I really do not believe that it's possible to go through your career without ever making a decision that we later think, okay, that maybe wasn't the best thing I could have done for my career. I know from my own perspective, there are moments where I can linger on a bit and think that, okay, maybe I made a decision from a place of not wanting to make a change, from a place of fear, and I already kind of knew how it would turn out, and it did turn out exactly the way it did. And then it was in many ways harder to dig myself out of that. But what's a really big question mark I always have when people tell me they regret their earlier decisions is, how much information did you really have when you made a decision, for example, to join a company, start a job, or extend a contract, or any of these decisions that we may later regret? Like, how much information did you really have? Because we are judging that decision now in the future from a place of knowing all the things. Now we know how it turned out, so we feel like we should have known better. But the thing is, we didn't. We just did not have the access to the information we have now. And it's very easy to now say, yeah, that was a bad experience, I should have avoided it. But there was maybe absolutely no way of you knowing that that's what the experience would look like. It's like if you went on holiday and you chose a hotel based on their website and everything looked really great and you heard really good reviews, but then you got food poisoning on the vacation and the vacation sucked. And it's easy to say, okay, that was a ruined vacation, I shouldn't have gone, but you couldn't have possibly know that that's what would happen there. And that's the same with these career decisions. You really cannot beat yourself up for not knowing the ins and outs of a company when all information you had was what was shared with you in the interview and like publicly available information about the company. And I know job seekers often get criticized for not sharing the whole truth during an interview process, but I can guarantee that the company is not sharing the full truth either. And their purpose in that interview is, of course, to find out if you are a good match, but at the same time, they need to try to sell you on that company and on that position and really hype it up. They're going to share the best possible information. Often they share like aspects of the job that might be part of it in the future. Typically, if it's some kind of mid-level position and they know they are interviewing someone very ambitious, they will promise that, yeah, but you know, like you will have a really big impact over the strategy, you will be in charge of big projects, but those things are kind of not given part of the job from the get-go. They are more like maybe eventually, maybe if this company really takes off. I think this is super common with startups. In my experience, people most commonly regret joining startups because what is promised during the interview, what like the potential, what it looks like it's gonna be, and then the reality of like the day-to-day struggle of securing funding and finding clients and like just staying afloat is so different to what was promised to you that it's very easy to put the blame on yourself and say that the problem was you and you shouldn't have made that decision to join the company. But this is based on information that nobody could have known in advance. And I don't also want that from now on you turn bitter and you always expect the worst of every company. But best you can do is just trust that you are making the right decision with the information you have. And if that information turns out to be false, you have the tools and capability to figure out your next step. I offer plenty of support for that on this podcast in my earlier episodes. So if you really try to do your best and put yourself back in the position in which you were when you were making the decision you now regret, how much information did you really know? Like what was even the information that was given to you about the company, about the position? Could there really be any clue that things would turn out the way they did? And did you make the right decision given the information you had, given the kind of person you were? Also, it's important to remember that we are not always in a place where we have many options. For example, in one of my previous jobs, I had a temporary contract. I knew the contract would end. I didn't have anything else lined up, really. That was maybe a bad decision to not have anything else lined up. I was just counting on that the contract would be extended, which it did. But the position I was offered was very, very far from what I actually wanted to do. But I was in a situation that my contract would expire in 2 weeks. I had nothing else. I knew that if I started looking at that point, it would take months. I would be without any income. I was very junior at that point. My CV wasn't very attractive to the job market. So I accepted. I signed a contract to do a job I really didn't want to do. But in reality, I was not in a position to make a choice and to say no. And there is a part of me that used to regret it. Now I'm kind of past it. I am in a very, very different place, and it just doesn't really matter what happened back then. But I have a compassion with myself, and I tell myself, well, I could just as well say that was a smart decision, because would it be smarter to just not have any job and decline a contract for a steady paycheck at that stage of my career? I don't think so. So it maybe cost me some time. Maybe there could have been a better job I could eventually find. But, that is often what people perceive, that if they hadn't made that decision, that maybe something better would have come along. But, what if not? What if, like in my case, instead of being in a job I didn't enjoy and I knew I don't want to do long term, I would be unemployed for the 10 months that I was in that particular job. Like that surely wouldn't do wonders to my CV, to my attractiveness to the job market. So I really wouldn't even entertain these thoughts that maybe there would have been something better. What matters is that maybe there is something better going forward. That is something you can actually affect. And if nothing else, the fact that you do have some bad experience from the past and you made some decisions that now looking back you wouldn't have made, you can use all that information going forward. So what are, for example, the things you should have asked in the interview process but you didn't, that would help you uncover the negative aspects? What were the earliest clues you could see that the job is not going in the direction you wanted it to go? Could you have tried sooner to do something about the situation? You can't go back in time. You just can't. You can wallow in the past and thinking how you could have done things differently, but that is a total waste of time. So thinking what makes sense going forward is how can you use that information in a productive way, not like, I joined a startup and it sucked, so I will never join a startup again. That is pointless. Like, why would you limit a huge amount of potentially very exciting jobs because of one bad experience? But how can you be in a better position to make the right decision next time? And the point is not that from now on, every single decision you will make will be right, but you should definitely become faster at spotting the red flags, spotting them early on, and not being afraid to act on them. And that can look differently. That can look like bringing it up to awareness of others, taking concrete steps to change the situation, and sometimes it can even mean leaving the company. One of the very common decisions my clients regret is staying with a company for way, way, way longer than they should have, even though for a very long time they knew that is not a good place for them, and they just postpone looking for something new for different reasons. Then sometimes it happened that in the meantime they got laid off. The decision was kind of made for them and they had nothing to lean back on. So the common bad decisions I hear is joining a company that just wasn't a good match, staying in a situation for way longer than should have been the case, postponing making a change even though you know it's the right thing, not speaking up, not taking action. Typically, I think that the bad decision regret is very commonly about not taking action rather than taking bad action. And all you can do going forward is to forgive yourself and evaluate how much information did you really have and were you really in a position that there were different options available to you, or were you understandably in a survival mode. And then going forward, how can you implement all that you have learned to make better decisions in the future? And if your main regret is about inaction, then that's the easiest situation. The path forward is by taking action as soon as you realize that some things need to change in your career. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this first part of Career Detox series. I hope you're ready to let go of some bad decisions about your past and you're ready to make the right decisions about your future. And I will see you next week with another episode and with another part of the Career Detox series. Bye bye.